Tobago, Mr. Beresford Riley, Chief Personnel Officer, well, my colleagues, members of the inner bar, representatives of the International Labour Organization, Decent Work Team and Office for the Caribbean, Mr. Keston Nanku, Chairman of Employers Consultative Association, heads of trade unions, government officials and representatives from government agencies, former judges of the Industrial Court, the Chief Executive Officer of the Employers Consultative Association, representatives of employer organizations, practitioners of industrial relations, specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, all. Trinidad and Tobago continues to rank as the most important financial center in the Southern Caribbean and one of the Caribbean community's strongest economies. We have, however, been weathering the impact of a contracting economy with its attendant effect on employment, provision of social services, and overall quality of life for many nationals. It is against this backdrop that the Industrial Court has continued to function in its central role of ensuring that a stable industrial relations climate prevails as a key step in supporting economic and social development. More importantly, the Court remains committed to its role as a bastion of social justice, steadfast in the belief that, as I stated in our 2014 annual report, there can be no development without peace and no peace without development. A fundamental aspect of pursuing such development is equitable economic growth. In this context, perhaps one of our Twin Island Republic most daunting challenges is what the IMF noted on Trinidad and Tobago in August this year, and I quote, "Economic challenges stemming primarily from sharp declines in global energy prices since 2014, combined with a fall in natural gas and oil production in recent years. These, along with the prolonged economic stagnation, capital allowances, and challenges with tax administration, have continued to contribute to weak revenue collections, leading to still significant fiscal deficits and rising public debt levels. Although preliminary data shows that the economy contracted in the first half of the year on weak energy production and spillovers to the non-energy sector, the economy may be starting to turn a corner as a result of projected recovery in gas output, though growth may still be flat or somewhat negative for the year as a whole. The economic improvement that is now beginning is projected to continue into the medium term, notably given a pipeline of projects that will improve the supply of natural gas to the downstream energy sector. Oil output is growing due to state-owned Petrotrin's recent exploration efforts and refinery upgrade. As the energy sector recovers, the non-energy sector is expected to rebound due to positive energy-related spillovers and as implementation of the public sector investment program picks up," unquote. As this country continues to grapple with the fall in energy prices and other economic challenges, the gap between the haves and the have-nots is widening. This is the focus of my speech today, the vexing problem of economic inequality in Trinidad and Tobago. President Franklin D. Roosevelt once said, "The test of our progress is not if we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little." Economic inequality is one of the most pressing problems facing countries across the globe. Former US President Barack Obama described it as the defining challenge of our time. In The Wealth of the Nations, Adam Smith, economist and philosopher, states that the true measure of a nation's wealth is not the size of its king's treasury or the holdings of an affluent few, but rather the wages of the laboring poor. Smith declares that it is a matter of simple equity that they who feed, clothe, and lodge the whole body of people should have a share of the produce of their own labor, as to themselves be tolerably well-fed, clothed, and lodged. Smith's observations, though dating 1776, still resonates today and highlights one of the most fundamental aspects of economic inequality, that it results in growing inequality of opportunity. This simply means that an increasing number of persons, merely due to the circumstance of their birth, their gender, the region in which they are born, or the group they are born to, have limited opportunities to lift themselves out of poverty. This restricts economic mobility and perpetuates what Lloyd Best famously termed persistent poverty across generations and depresses growth. It is important to highlight that security, health, and education are among the most critical issues impacted by inequality of opportunity. It is therefore no coincidence that these hot-button topics generate the most debates and continue to be developed in terms of policy approaches and prescriptions to treat with them, for they are the ones that have immediate and visceral impact on our quality of life and that of our families. Simply put, economic inequality with its attendant problem of crime, poor education, and the inability to access proper health care is inextricably linked to social inequality and therefore poses a threat to the medium and long-term prospects of our growth and development as a people and a society. One of the most widely studied and debated aspects of the inequality question, is the link to crime. Crime and poverty have always been closely associated, especially in countries like Trinidad and Tobago, where despite our gains made in development, there is a shrinking middle class and an increasing number of poor citizens, including those who can be defined as the working poor, those who are employed but are still living below the poverty line. This country has been wrestling with the disturbing, persistent problem of crime for more than a decade. Those of us who have not experienced crime firsthand know of someone who did. The fracture, pain, chaos which citizens experience in the aftermath of crime, especially murder, is horrific and long-lasting. Crime creates instability and fosters an almost semi-permanent culture of fear among citizens. Critically, this instability and fear also permeates specific sectors, particularly the business sector, that as they depress the entrepreneurial spirit, incurs tremendous costs in terms of security provision, limit customer activity and purchasing power, and work to generally prevent businesses from thriving, particularly small businesses. Moreover, we hear numerous media reports of businesses that have been repeatedly robbed and the owners brutalized. Some business owners have no choice but to close their business, exacerbating further the problem of unemployment and injecting increased uncertainty into the society and the economy. From an industrial relations perspective, crime has a crippling effect on business and economic development. There is need for us as a people, as a nation, to collectively and urgently address the root causes of this crisis and devise mechanisms to protect business owners and workers from these growing incidences of crime. These mechanisms should be carefully crafted to take into account the problems which exist in the criminal justice system, the growing number of small and medium-sized businesses, and their challenges in coping with crime. In developing these mechanisms, due note should be taken to the increasing unemployment and the impact of this on poverty. According to the statistics of the Central Statistical Office, there are 5,500 less persons with jobs in the second quarter of 2016 compared to 2015, and the number of persons classified as unemployed grew by 10% to 21,100 persons at the end of June 2016, which is a little more than a year ago. I want to state categorically that I'm not saying that poverty is the reason for crime. In fact, poverty at times creates a springboard and a path for many to achieve success. However, we cannot ignore the fact that there is a close relationship or correlation between crime and poverty. I return to Adam Smith, who underscored that, and I quote, "The allure of extreme wealth can contort human sympathies, causing the public to admire the wealthy and shun the poor," unquote. It is therefore an indictment of sorts that in a country that the World Bank describes as high income, with one of the highest gross national incomes in Latin America and the Caribbean, US $17,640 in 2015, there are citizens who still cannot afford to send their children to school each day, cannot clothe and feed them properly, and cannot begin to conceptualize anything but a life of grinding poverty. In a country where we have produced a Nobel laureate in literature and boasts of a high literacy rate 55 years after independence, there are a number of young people in this country who are illiterate, uneducated, and lack important social skills because some of them have not been socialized in a school environment and are not properly equipped to function at an acceptable social level. Some of them are unemployed and some commit crime. Of course, there are criminals who are educated and gainfully employed. However, my point and focus is the large number of young, underemployed and unemployed persons who are increasingly committing violent crime. On a personal note, when I became a magistrate in 1990, the average age of a criminal was between 25 and 35 years. And some of the very vicious and violent crimes that we experience today were unheard of. At some point, those who were involved in crime became younger, and it changed to between 20 to 25 years. When I left the magistracy in 2003, teenagers were committing crime, with some as young as 12 years old. And I am sure you would accept that many of those who commit violent crimes today are under the age 30. All of the above highlight one of the basic problems with economic inequality, which is that it is bad for everyone, the rich and poor alike. Crime affects everyone, and there is no safe haven in Trinidad and Tobago to protect you from the ravages of crime. Another key element in growing inequity, is the ability of citizens to access basic services, one of which is healthcare. There are citizens who do not have access to proper healthcare because they simply cannot afford it. While this country provides free healthcare services to all citizens, the sheer volume of those seeking to access these services makes it impossible for the state to provide optimal service for all. As a result, many citizens seek health care at private clinics. Those who are poor do not have that luxury, and we hear of many tragic repercussions and heart-wrenching accounts of those who are impacted simply due to their inability to access proper medical treatment. The same extends to the question of ensuring that our education system is acceptable by all and is for all, regardless of one's economic status. We have done very well over the past few decades in terms of our educational progress and the impact this has had on social and economic mobility and decreasing intergenerational poverty has been profound. Far too often and increasingly, we hear of the established links between the levels of literacy, poverty, and criminal behavior. We have to continue to work assiduously to ensure that the education skill mismatch is narrowed so that young people are better equipped to enter the labor market and secure decent work over the course of their economically active lives. In my respectful view, we have to tackle the issue of poverty, which will not remove inequality entirely, will play an important role in reducing it. It is against this backdrop that among the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is Sustainable Development Goal 10, which is to reduce inequality within and among countries. There is growing consensus that economic growth is not sufficient to reduce poverty if it is not inclusive, and if it does not involve the three dimensions of sustainable development, namely economic, social, and environmental. We therefore need to encourage that our social and economic policies focus on the disadvantaged and the marginalized in society. Let me hasten to add that it is not for me to determine what should be the government's policy on economic inequality. However, like every right-thinking citizen in Trinidad and Tobago, I am deeply concerned about the widening gap between the rich and poor and the repercussions that flow from this. It is therefore no surprise over the years, and I think stakeholders know that, in my annual address, I always reflect on my belief that we should always remain focused on the need for inclusive growth. I will repeat what I said in 2014, which is that good governance and the rule of law are prerequisites in attaining equitable growth and sustainable development in any country. Our public policy must be inclusive of all groups, particularly those that are most vulnerable. As the country continues to experience what has been described as a recession, the private sector can play a significant role in shaping our future economic development by innovation and job creation. This is particularly relevant in our specific context in Trinidad and Tobago, where micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises are estimated to contribute 28% of our gross domestic product, represent more than 20,000 enterprises, provide employment for an estimated 200,000 persons, and account for 85% of all registered businesses. Trade unions have traditionally played a central role in shaping the employment culture and the working lives of citizens. At a time like this, when the country is experiencing economic challenges, how the trade union movement respond to these challenges and opportunities over the next few years will be crucial in determining their continued relevance and overall level of influence. Among the realities the trade unions are faced with today is the growth of the use of short-term contracts, the increased use of labor providing agencies in the energy sector, and the outsourcing by firms of non-core activities to other firms. Trade unions must adapt to the ever-shifting landscape of the labor market. In terms of the current economic constraints which we are experiencing in Trinidad and Tobago, trade unions, in my view, need to develop a working and comprehensive understanding of what is this recession as announced by government, entails. Accordingly, there might be a need to adjust their rhetorical sails to to better match prevailing economic winds and present realities. It simply cannot be business as usual. Therefore, there might be a need for unions to engage the services of experts who can clinically and thoroughly analyze financial reports which are emanating from companies where unions represent workers, in order to have a more panoramic understanding of what is the financial picture of that particular company, so that the union can in turn provide a realistic and comprehensive report to workers of what is actually taking place, and in so doing, better represent them. I wish to suggest also that one of the factors which can contribute to the stimulation of meaningful and sustained growth in the economy is for each side, business and labor, to put aside their mistrust and differences and enter into meaningful relationships. These relationships should be aimed at developing strategies that can impact on the survival and profitability of businesses and the promotion of sustainable, equitable economic growth in this country. This is a time for all hands to be on deck. Although at times the relationship between unions and business may appear to be acrimonious, let us not forget that unions and business have a common purpose. And that common purpose is for the business to be successful and profitable, so that the business owners can make profit and employees can earn their wages and have job security. I think we must never lose sight of that common purpose. This is a time to foster more symbiotic labor relationships, the time to encourage discussions on issues at the workplace, and it is also the time to adopt a less adversarial approach and foster a more collaborative approach towards problem solving in the workplace. I have advocated in the past, and I continue to advocate, that the internal structures of a business should be less autocratic and allow employees or employees' representatives and business owners to sit and engage in meaningful dialogue about issues at work and what serves the best interest of the company. In this highly globalized world, which is facing economic and environmental challenges, this is a time more than ever to work together in a tripartite setting. The meetings of government, employers, and unions are critical to address economic and work-related issues and to promote sustained economic growth. The industrial relations culture in Trinidad and Tobago has to develop to be a culture of dialogue and consensus rather than a culture of discord. To this end, and to facilitate and to assist in facilitating the proliferation of this approach, I have begun an outreach initiative across our Twin Island Republic, where I'm attempting to bring a greater understanding of industrial relations issues and highlight the importance of a harmonious approach to tripartite relationship and dialogue. I started this outreach in Mayaro. I don't think anyone will be surprised. More than a week ago. I call on both the business community and labor to support this endeavor, as it can redound to the mutual benefit of all parties and will, in my view, contribute to bridging the gaps of knowledge that exist with respect to the intersect between labor and business. Moreover, we can perhaps use this as an opportunity to start a much-needed conversation on developing more lasting mechanisms to support social dialogue, which can be of tremendous benefit. It is in this context I now turn to the work of the Industrial Court over the past year. For the period September 2016 to September 2017, and the period our year is September the 15th to September the 15th in each year. So for the period September last year to September this year, 1,158 new cases were filed at the Industrial Court, 36 less than the same period 2015-2016, which recorded 1,194 cases. Additionally, the court disposed of 824 matters in the year in review, which is lower than the 696 matters disposed of for the same period 2015-2016. The disposal rate of 2016-2017 is 71.1%, which is 12.3 percentage points lower than the period 2015 to 2016, when the disposal rate was 83.4%. Of the total number of disputes disposed during the period in review, 21.9%, which is 179 matters, were from judgments, 36.6%, which is 310 matters, were withdrawn, 35.4%, which is 292 matters, were settled through the conciliation and bilateral process, and 5.3%, which is 43 matters, were dismissed for want of prosecution. Of the total matters filed at the court for this year, 2016-2017, trade disputes remain the largest numbers filed, which is 881, 67.4%, followed by occupational safety and health, 142, which is 12.3%, and retrenchment and severance benefit, 53, which is 4.6%. This year, 20 new matters of disputes on breakdown in negotiations have been filed at the court, compared to 2015-2016, when 7 such matters were filed. The Meet with the Court Symposium. On Saturday, 24th June this year, the Industrial Court held its annual Meet with the Court Symposium, the aim of which is to encourage dialogue among stakeholders on issues affecting the industrial relations landscape. This year, the court collaborated with the ILO to host the event, and as a result of the generous support of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, the symposium was held at the regimental headquarters in Aranguez. The theme this year, fixed-term contracts in the public sector, generated discussions on the legal impact of short-term contracts in Trinidad and Tobago. I take the opportunity to express my sincere thanks to our presenters, Mrs. Shingo Maeke from the ILO, Decent Work Team in the Caribbean, Dr. Leighton Jackson, Dean of the Faculty of Law, Caville Campus, and Dr. Ralph Henry, economist. Special thanks to the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force for the use of their facility. I also wish to thank the staff for their hard work each year, and all our stakeholders for their attendance and participation. This contributed in making another successful symposium. Access to Justice Tobago. As stakeholders are aware, since 2012, the Industrial Court has been hosting sessions in Tobago each year during the court vacation. This year, we had no sittings in Tobago due to lack of funds. However, the court remains committed to providing proper access to justice to all citizens. Works have not yet started on the building which the court has acquired in Tobago, but we have been in discussions with NIPDEC with the hope of receiving the necessary technical support for this renovation exercise to become a reality. Trends in Labor Bulletin. The court continues to strengthen its in-house data and statistics on labor market activity, and in so doing, provide stakeholders with information on the state of the industrial relations environment in Trinidad and Tobago. I am pleased to announce that we have completed our 3rd Trends in Labor and Industrial Relations Bulletin in March this year. However, unfortunately, this bulletin cannot be printed or published due to lack of funds. However, I hope that it will be available to stakeholders by the end of this calendar year. I pause to make mention of the Registration, Recognition, and Certification Board and its operations. Over the years, in a period which may have spanned more than a decade, the board took an inordinately lengthy period of time to complete matters. This delay impacted on the work of the Industrial Court, and some disputes had to be adjourned generally for many years pending the ruling of the board. I think, and this is my personal view, that the delays at the board were primarily due to the lack of resources invested in that area. However, since Mr. Augustus Ramrikasinghe assumed office as chairman, there has been a noticeable increase in the disposal of matters at the board, and this has impacted in a positive way at the court. And I want to commend publicly Mr. Ramrikasinghe and the board for the good work which they are doing. Training. There was no judicial education training this year for judges due to budgetary constraints. Some members of staff did receive training. The librarian attended a conference where she presented a paper in the Bahamas. 21 members of staff benefited from in-house training on performance management in the public service. 4 members of staff attended a 4-day training on procurement. And Dr. Jackson conducted a 1-day training in legal research and procedures for staff of the library, the Office of Economic and Industrial Research, and the legal department. This training is a continuation of last year's training as we continue to strengthen the industrial court's research capacity. When I assumed office in December 2011, there were a number of outstanding judgments to be delivered by the court, some dated as far back as 2008. In my address to stakeholders in 2012, I indicated that my main focus was to clear the backlog and deliver judgments in a timely manner. Judges and staff have worked tirelessly to clear this backlog, and by 2014, there were no reserved judgments for any period before that year. However, due to the chronic and continued shortage of staff in the court reporting unit, we have not been able to deliver the number of judgments as we would like this year. As you know, the court reporting unit provides support for the court at each hearing, transcribes all the notes of evidence and submissions from hearing, and makes them available for judges' use in the preparation of judgments. This unit also prepares and provides notes of evidence when requested by practitioners in proceedings in court. There are 25 positions of verbatim reporters at the industrial court. 18 of these positions are without incumbents, and therefore only 7 persons are currently employed at the court as reporters. It is simply impossible for court reporters to accomplish their task with so few staff. To make matters worse, we have limited funds, so we cannot employ a number of persons on contract to assist with the preparation and transcription of notes. Despite my repeated calls over all the years, the court has not been provided with any replacement staff in that unit. This year, the industrial court delivered 179 judgments. This is significantly less than the number of judgments which were delivered last year, when 277 judgments were delivered. My fear is that this chronic shortage of court reporters, we will revert to the same position we were in 2011. Space. In 1997, when the industrial court opened its new building in Port of Spain, there were a total of 101 persons on board. This figure included judges and staff. In 2017, the total number of persons who work in the Port of Spain building is 160. The industrial court is in dire need for more space. There is simply not enough space to adequately accommodate staff and judges. This is a chronic problem which I have addressed publicly each year for the past 5 years. And I think I may have become the proverbial voice in the wilderness. I implore the powers that be to urgently address this problem. Judges at the court. This year, 4 judges ended their term with the Industrial Court. They are His Honor Mr. Dinesh Ramboli, His Honor Mr. Robert Linton, His Honor Mr. Nizam Khan, and His Honor Mr. Brian Debadine. The court welcomed 3 new judges, and they are Her Honor Ms. Michelle Austin, His Honor Mr. Andrew Stroud, and His Honor Mr. Azim Mohammed. I wish to thank the judges and the staff of the court for their professionalism and their continued support over the course of the past year. This support is made even more invaluable against the backdrop of the challenges and constraints we have faced as an organization. I wish to also express my appreciation to stakeholders for your continued participation in the process, and I look forward to your continued engagement in the future. As I conclude, I take the opportunity to assure that we at the Industrial Court will continue to promote inclusive growth and equality. In this context, it will be remiss of me not to reiterate that for this nation to weather these prevailing winds currently buffeting our economy and by extension our society, this is a time for all hands to be on deck. There is an urgent need for all stakeholders to commit to tripartism, where labor, business, and government can engage in genuine, meaningful discussions with a view to arriving at policy prescriptions and solutions that will assist our country in realizing sustainable growth and greater resilience. Key to this is that the social partners fully embrace social dialogue as a fundamental mechanism in pursuit of this objective. I am therefore heartened by the recent announcement of the Joint Trade Union Movement that movement will return to the National Tripartite Advisory Council, as it speaks to the enduring value of the tripartite approach and augurs well for the crafting of sustainable solutions to our common challenges. I am reminded of the words of the prolific Trinbagonian composer, Dennis Franklin the Merchant, who called on us to symbolically work together in his timeless voice, saying, "Now more than ever, we must show discipline, tolerance, and production. To build a strong and better nation, I say, this is the main foundation. So come, let us walk hand in hand, because this is our land. Come, my sister, come, my brother, let us build a nation together." May God bless this nation. May God bless you all. I thank you for listening.